Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya and today we will discuss the issue of hate speech on social media platforms and its impact on the internal security of the country. Social media platforms like Facebook, Google, Twitter and many others have revolutionized the way we communicate as a society. These platforms, which we use to chat with friends and family, share photographs and personal information, have a powerful impact on the public discourse. Like any other mode of communication, this medium too is susceptible to misuse. We are vulnerable to the content that grabs our attention, regardless of its veracity or substance. The problem becomes more grave when these platforms are used for propaganda or the propagation of hate speech and by the terror outfits to spread their message of hate and violence and radicalize the youth. This in turn affects the internal security of the country. Of late, several steps have been taken by various countries such as Germany and United Kingdom to combat the menace of hate speech on social media platforms. In India too, this issue has been debated and discussed since the Supreme Court struck down Section 66A of the IT Act in March 2015, terming it as being open-ended, undefined and vague. The central government has then set up an expert committee headed by former Law Secretary and Secretary General of Lok Sabha, T.K. Viswanathan, to propose new laws or amendments to deal with hate speech on internet. According to reports, the committee has suggested that some sections of the IPC, Code of Criminal Procedure, and the IT Act should be amended to introduce stringent provisions specifying punishment to deal with cases of hate speech and use of cyberspace to spread hatred and incitement. So, how big is the threat of hate speech on social media platforms, and will the proposed changes have the desired impact without curtailing the freedom of expression as defined by the Apex Court? To have a discussion on this, we have with us today a distinguished panel of guests. Let me introduce you to them. Starting with Mr. Anil Choudhary, former Secretary Internal Security of Ministry of Home Affairs. We also have with us Mr. Yatish Yadav, the Deputy Editor of New Indian Express. And we have with us a young lawyer, Mr. Apar Gupta, cyber law expert and somebody who was a part of those litigations in the Supreme Court on 66A of the IT Act. Let me begin with you, Mr. Choudhary. As far as hate speech on social media is concerned, it's something which cannot be seen in the isolation, only in terms of what effect it might have on people, but also in terms of the internal security matters. We've seen there have been cases wherein the banned organizations or the terror outfits have used these platforms to further their motives.
Vishal, your opening remarks are on the ball. The social media is a huge platform. It has overtaken the print and electronic by miles. It poses serious challenges on internal security front. It has been used extensively by the government, by the terrorists, by the police and by citizens individually. But the terrorists are far ahead of the government in this regard. They have used it to a very malicious effect to propagate their hate propaganda and to spread their message of spreading hatred, violence and disaffection among the people. Most tellingly in our north, in Kashmir Valley. It is, the problem is it is anonymous. It is not easy. It's very difficult to trace who is posting it. Robots can post fake items of news. It can morph pictures and clips of videos and create so much hatred and ill will that it takes a lot of effort on the part of law enforcement agencies to be able to keep the situation under control. Our masses are more susceptible than the West because our level of education is lower. In Germany and in UK, as you rightly pointed out, they have decided to come down heavily against it. In Germany, I'm told the responsibility for not allowing any hatred to be spread via the media, whether it's Facebook or Google or Twitter.
Lies on the companies.
On the companies. Millions of dollars of penalty have been, within 24 hours, they're supposed to remove it.
Okay, so what you're saying is that it is the anonymity of the messages behind the messages on social media platforms, which is the real cause. Let me bring in Mr. Yatish out here. Mr. Yatish, how big do you believe this issue of social media, hate speech on social media, poses a threat to the internal security?
It's huge. It's enormous. If you look at the 2012 incident which happened in Assam 5 years ago, and till now, social media has played a very major role in inciting violence in certain pockets, as well as radicalizing people. The National Investigation Agency, they are looking into at least 20 cases where the youths who were radicalized and then later traveled to Syria and Iraq to fight with ISIS, they were radicalized online. So they had readily available materials in social media and other platforms. There are 3-4 more which have come now under the scanner of the Indian agencies. At the same time, there are twin issues. How to regulate the users, the posting of the content. At the same time, how to look into the new rules which will give more leverage to Indian agencies to take down those contents, which is very objectionable and which could incite the hate or violence in certain pockets. So these two issues, like we were talking about TK Viswanathan committee, I think just like Germany, we also need to have a proper e-safety commissioner. We have in Australia, but we don't have in India. Right now, our measures are very ad hoc in a sense. But we need to have a proper system in place where we can tell, all the social media platforms that you need to give us some kind of access so we can take down. It's not about, just sending the legal letter to all these media platforms to take down the content, which takes a lot of time, 3 months, 6 months. We need to do it immediately.
We need to do it immediately. Before I go to Apar, let me pose one more small question to Mr. Choudhary. Mr. Choudhary, when Yatish is talking about more robust mechanisms, is it, would you say that the situation has rather become more grave in past 2.5 years after the 66A, Section 66A of the IT Act was struck down by the court?
See, the situation is grave. I am not in a position to compare what was happening earlier now. At the moment, the situation is really grave. You see, terrorism has become global. The IS is using the social media to carry out recruitments in India. And it's a fact. They are spreading their message. You see, you don't have to spread it from the mosques now. You don't need Maulvis, you don't need mullahs. You just start preaching hatred to the social media. And the reach is huge, much more, and anonymity, as I said, and fake news. See, in my view, the responsibility for not allowing such things to come should be placed on the companies.
It should
whether
be
it's
placed.
Google or Yahoo or whatever.
We'll come back to that aspect of it. Let me bring in Apar here. Apar, you put up a very strong case when 66A was being challenged in the Supreme Court, and finally it was termed as a victory of the freedom of speech. But then in the present scenario, as our other two panelists are pointing out, it is a very grave situation. Both of them are of the viewpoint that we need to have some kind of robust mechanism. So would you also agree to the fact that we need to have some sort of mechanism where all these issues of hate speech on social media can be regulated in one way or the other?
So the question presupposes that we don't have either tough enough substantive laws or we don't have the machinery to enforce those laws. Now, these are the two claims which underpin the need for something new. Right? And if we look at the substance of the laws itself, the Law Commission in its March 2017 report, which also plays into the Viswanathan Committee based on, again, press reports, because contents of the Viswanathan Committee report have not been made public.
Not yet public.
We don't know what's new 66 in. None of us know. Okay? So it seems that the hate speech provisions are suggested for reform, which already exist under the Indian Penal Code, to expressly include within itself whether they are disseminated online or in person. Now, this legal disability was never in the way. People were prosecuted under hate speech provisions under the IPC even earlier. Secondly, is our machinery of enforcement lacking? And here there is some amount of agreement I will signal with the co-panelists. I think in terms of investigation, in terms of properly analyzing what constitutes hate speech and what does not, we have been failing till now, which has led to not only people not being prosecuted properly, but also to abuse, where two girls are picked up in Maharashtra, a cartoonist is picked up in Delhi, and people who signal political dissent are brought within the envelope of hate speech itself. So we have to tread this path a little carefully. The second thing is, and I would like to signal, is that 66A was struck down by the court because it was considered to be broad, ambiguous, and vague. Let us first tie in on what is the specific legal need which is missing from our existing legal codes, right? Hate speech has been covered for years and it's been covered under 6 to 7 different provisions under the IPC. What is the deficiency there? Number one. Secondly, if you're talking about radicalizing youth, that's related, occidental, but still not within the folds of hate speech itself. Okay. Here you are specifically targeting youth, manipulating them through incessant messaging and essentially radicalizing them to commit acts of terror. By itself, that doesn't come within the ambit of hate speech, and as per me, that is something much more grievous, much more sinister, and needs to be looked at much more severely by the law.
Okay, so you're saying that we need to go ahead and find out as to what is missing. Yatish, if we look at, and Apar rightly pointed out that, the report, contents of the report are not in public domain, but what has been reported in the newspapers is a clear indication that the committee has made certain recommendations where it is pointing out that we should maintain a fine balance between tackling the issue of hate speech and ensuring that we do not trample upon the right to freedom of speech.
Yes, of course, we need both, because as Apar said that, this hate speech issue has been coming up over the period of time and in the past also. But if we look at the penetration of internet and access to mobile and all other social media platform, this is huge. We've never expected that, India will be the third largest internet penetrating country. We have a lot of users.
And the number is increasing.
The number is increasing day by day. So the scale has gone up. Since 2012 to 2017, in 5 years, we have seen the growth like we have never seen. So we have more users. It means that we have more, posting all the information. And I'm not saying that I'm not against the freedom of speech. But at the same time, we need to have a mechanism when there is an objectionable content, we have the tools to just take it down. That is most important. Like US does. Sometimes even the US is failing to do that. What happened in the Pennsylvania University was a clear case of the racist comment, where people had created a social group where they were making comments against the black. So FBI was asked to investigate that case. In India, we also need to have a certain mechanism where we can ask all the social media platforms which are, operating in India and benefiting out of it to at least give us the access, give us some kind of a tools where we can regulate the content at least.
Okay, on this question, let's go back to our man from the establishment, Mr. Choudhary. Mr. Choudhary, both our panelists are pointing out that we need to have some mechanism, and Apar has gone a step further, saying that we need to find out where are we lacking in the present mechanism, rather than vaguely pointing out that we do not have enough ways to deal with it.
Apar made a good point. Our capabilities in the area of investigating cyber crime is extremely limited and needs to be sharpened much more. The current capabilities of law enforcement agencies, central and states, to investigate and prosecute cyber crime is very limited. We do not have the wherewithal. Having said that, I think he made a very good point that there needs to be a balance. Certainly there needs to be a balance. India is a democracy. We are proud to be a democracy. We need to have the freedom of speech to the extent that social media cannot be banned.
Okay.
You cannot. It was tried, but it didn't succeed. In Kashmir also, I think in April, they did ban all kinds of Twitter. It did not work because the youth especially need to reach out to learn. But the youth are also very vulnerable, and they get carried away by, heroes being made of people like Budhan Wani, a 20-year-old kid wielding guns, killing people. That struck the imagination of the youth in Kashmir Valley. And it has created problems on the law and order front.
So definitely there has to be some sort of mechanism. Let me bring in Apar again on this and on the legal point. Although, as you pointed out, the report is not in public domain. We cannot decisively say that this is what the report says. But then one thing which is being reported is that this committee has drawn heavily from the laws which have been made in other countries in the recent past, specifically in European countries, be it Germany or be it United Kingdom. Now, the German law, which has come into effect from 2nd of October only, specifically puts the onus on the companies which run these social media platforms. So, is that one of the effective ways to go ahead and do it?
So, this argument was made in the Supreme Court in the Sharia single case as well, where people said that the most efficient way of bringing down content which is illegal is for the platforms themselves to have the responsibility of policing it. Okay, so Facebook makes so much money, it has so many people, and it has the ability of taking down content for, let's say, copyright violations. Why can't it do it for hate speech? This was the argument made. And facially, it seems to be a very strong argument, right? But ultimately, what you're doing is putting a private party such as Facebook in the position of a judge. And the argument which was made from the other side, which did find favor with the court, was that the Indian state, its executive agencies, which include the Thana as well, and which has powers under the CRPC for issuing takedown notices, as well as our judges, are the better entity to enforce these takedowns because they are created by law to enforce law. A private entity tomorrow may just take down any and every content based on any complaint it gets, because it also, under the legal system which we operate, if does not take it down, then becomes an accessory to that content as well. Okay. So ultimately, the burden which should be placed on an intermediary should be efficacious responses with any kind of government request which goes to it. At the same point of time, government requests should be made in a transparent manner. They should follow norms of legality and constitutional norms of the content which is being asked to be taken down as per the reasonable restrictions to free expression. This is a complex balance which was arrived at by the Sharia single judgment, because otherwise it leads to this clip possibly of this show being taken down because some person is bored over the internet and sends in a complaint.
Well, that's obviously one of the aspects of the entire discussion. Let me throw this back to Yatish. Yatish, do you agree with Apar on this point that it would not be right to put the entire onus on the companies which operate these social media platforms? The government or the agencies, the law enforcement agencies cannot wash their hands off.
No, it's about getting the access. It's about getting the server. Like what is happening in Russia. The Russian government is saying, the law enforcement, that put the server here in Russia. Okay. So at least we can regulate it. What you do, there are some contents which we need to take down immediately. Otherwise, if it's delayed in your legal proceedings, and you send the note to other governments and they will take it down, or it will go to Facebook, because the compliance of the Facebook
time is going to be lost.
Yeah, Facebook compliance is hardly 50% in most of the application that goes to Facebook. The same with the Google. Even in emergency content, it's 60%. So by the time you take down the content, the damage is already done. Okay. You can't do anything. So what government needs to do, government need to sit with all these organizations and private organizations, Facebook, Google or whatever, and they need to talk to them. That give us the access to the server, give us the tools through which we can take it down. We can inform you that these are the contents which we want to take it down, and we can do it effectively and immediately. Otherwise, by the time 15 days, 20 days later, if you are going to remove a hate content, there could be a violence somewhere.
Okay, Mr. Choudhary, Apar says that this is a very complex phenomenon which has to be, maintained. The balance has to be maintained, and Yatish is pointing out that yes, this is to be done. My question to you is that we have an elaborate, mechanism to enforce law and order, and this might be a very unique problem. But then the existing mechanisms which are there, aren't they enough to go ahead and enforce compliance from these companies rather than pulling out some other new form of law?
See, I'm not a legal expert. I have no legal knowledge to match Apar's. But I know one thing. He made a point, and that is correct. we should not leave it entirely to the companies to identify what is going to create hate. That has to be done by the law enforcement agencies and the judiciary system. But then having done that, the responsibility for removing it should be placed with the companies. That
because originally it was their work to go ahead and put it on the platform.
He says yes. We cannot make them judges to know what is going to spread hatred and what is not. No, but once they are told, okay, this is likely to create hatred and internal security and law and order problem, they have to remove it.
Yes. Okay.
They have the means to do it. They have the wherewithal. They have to be made to use that wherewithal to clean up that filth.
Okay, one more point to Yatish when we're talking about the enforcement of this on the ground level. And according to reports, one of the suggestions which Vishwanath committee has made is that young officers at district level should be the ones who should be responsible for these district cyber crime cells. There are a clear indication that youngsters and young officers who join would be more conversant with how the social media platforms work. So is that the right way to approach?
Yeah, of course. I think some states have already started doing it. If you look at the Telangana is doing a great job in cyber security. Rajasthan, ATS, they are doing a tremendous job. So certain states have taken the steps on their own to do it. But what we need, there are two stages at least. One, that you train all these officers to do that. Second, you need to give them the tools. You need to have the access. I'm repeating this again and again. In India, we don't have their servers. So what these officers, even if you train them, what they will do, they will just write a note that this is the hate content and this is what we have detected, and it will be sent to US or to other places wherever they have the servers. So they will then remove it. So apart from training, what they need, the government of India need to provide them is the tool to, once they have identified these content, hate speeches or other contents, they can immediately act on that. That is most important.
Okay, Apar, concluding comments from you on the fact that obviously all of us agree that we need to strike a balance between ensuring the freedom of speech as well as ensuring that the hate speech on social media is tackled. So what's the best way out?
So some notes of caution here. We've had hate speech laws for a long period of time. They have been characterized and they appear in the press more for their abuse rather than their effective enforcement. Let's look at all the laws which we have right now to restrict speech and see how well they are working. And I think this will find agreement with a lot of people who want it to be much more stringent as well as people who want it to be less severe. Because the thing is that when we are talking about crimes which are acting on the internet, where everybody has become a speaker, we also need to have a much more fundamental conversation. Because for the first time, Indians and the masses have access to large audiences in which they can broadcast their messages. And I think I'll leave it with that.
Okay, Mr. Anil, your parting comment on this?
See, the way forward has been, there has to be a movement forward. We have to find a way how to frame the laws in a manner that they are transparent, fair, also does not restrict freedom of speech, and yet is cautious and vigilant against misuse by terrorists and criminals of this social media.
Okay, so clearly it looks like that the issue of hate speech on social media is a very real threat and a very large one at that. We cannot wish it away. We will have to ensure that we boost our mechanisms, but as our panelists are pointing out, we also need to ensure that there is a very fine balance maintained between enforcement of laws and ensuring freedom of speech. We'll come back again next week with a different set of guests and different topic. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.